Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football and welcome back to Football Theory. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis, pleased to be joined by my esteemed colleague and good friend, Jeff Howe. We'll get into a little of Texas-Mississippi State breakdown and preview, but from a football theory perspective, we'll talk about both sides of the ball. Sark says the offense should be noticeably different versus Mississippi State, and also the at least the probability that you would get CJ Baxter back. We'll talk about how that would impact the offense, and then defending one of the old Big 12 concepts that the Longhorn fans should be familiar with, that old veer and shoot, defending that old Art Browse offense, essentially what Jeff Levy's running there. We'll talk about that too on the defensive side of things. Before we get started, though, let's thank our first sponsor. Let's thank our friends over at Duck Camp. We appreciate our friends at Duck Camp being a part of the On Texas football family and sponsoring Football Theory. Duck Camp makes gear for folks who live for being out there, whether that's in a duck blind at sunrise or on the 40 acres or for a Saturday kickoff. Born right here in the great city of Austin, Duck Camp builds best-in-class hunting and fishing apparel that works just as well for a full day in the field as it does for a long day of tailgating. From sun protection shirts that keep you cool during those early season scorchers to their iconic game series hats that feel like instant classics, Duck Camp gear is ready for football season, hunting season, and every season in between. Get out there and stay out there and hook 'em horns. Shop Duck Camp at duckcamp.com and use the code ONTexas25. That's ONTexas25 for 25% off of your purchase there at Duck Camp. Thank you very much to our friends at duckcamp.com. All right, Jeff, Sark did hint the offense going to look a little bit different. Well, it certainly will if you get CJ Baxter back. So in addition to CJ Baxter but potentially coming back, impacting the offensive scheme and game plan, I just think Sark now trying to solve a lot of the problems that they have on offense. I think this is going to be the game where he throws out a lot of those solutions. And I just kind of want to get into how I think the offense is going to look as a result of that. One thing I think you're going to get that's going to be a big bonus is just if CJ Baxter is back, you get more variety in the run game. I went back and looked at that Ohio State game, which is the last time you had kind of the full complement versus a power 4 team of Trey Wisner and CJ Baxter. I think we forget how diverse the run game was in that matchup. This is all the concepts I looked at, Jeff. They ran counter, inside zone read, inside power. They ran pin and pull. They ran outside power. They ran insert scheme where they'd have the H-back corner right inside that interior gap there. They ran reverse, the quarterback run game. They ran the quarterback draw. I mean, it's been a while since Texas had been that diverse in the run game, and they were actually pretty successful on a lot of those run concepts. I think that's what CJ Baxter is going to bring to the table for you. You're going to get variety back in the run game with him and him and Trey Wisner. I think that's ultimately what could end up not solving a lot of your problems, but at least helping you address and bring in a lot of solutions to the table for you.
Man, you're right, because that game was like 6-7 weeks ago, and it feels like it was 6-7 months ago at this point. The offense is in a very different place than we assumed it would be at this point. But I'm with you, Rod. I like the diversity in the run game, but there's a couple of things I think that are at play here. One, I think you've got to try exhaust all your options trying to establish the run. I think we've seen, especially in the Oklahoma game, and we've seen what it looked like against Florida and Kentucky when you either couldn't or didn't establish the run versus the Oklahoma game, and even Ohio State when you were able to run the football. Those are going to make for easier throws for Arts. It's going to make things flow better on offense. You're going to be at least maybe not ahead of the chains all the time, but you're not going to be behind the chains like you have been, like you were against Florida and Kentucky. You're going to be more in the ballpark of being on schedule, which this offense, Rod, it has to try to operate on schedule as much as possible. So I think you have to establish the run. And two, I think it's going to take a lot of patience from Sark. Look, I have confidence when he says, hey, and he's not going to give us the game plan, but he says philosophically, you'll probably see more of what you saw against Oklahoma than what you did against Florida and Kentucky. But I think for Sark, Rod, philosophically, the change has to be, you know what? You have to be content with the fact that a 4-yard run for this offense is probably a really good play.
So when
you have to be content with the fact that, unlike the last 2 years, you're probably not going to suddenly flip the switch and the biggest percentage of your first downs are going to come on first and second down, because you can't rely on the explosive play element right now. A really good down for this offense is third and probably 5 or less.
Mm-hmm.
That way, the more the playbook is open, you're going to help take the burden off of Arch. You're going to take some of the burden off the offensive line. So I think to me, it's less about having answers for your opponent as opposed to Sark philosophically. If he can look back and say, yeah, you can call it, leveling down the playbook or minimizing the playbook, couch it however you want, label it however you want. But the bottom line is, I think Sark has to realize this offense for this team to win is better suited by extending drives, shortening the game, and maximizing every possession. That is the big thing, Rob. Because you lack the explosive play element, you cannot afford to give away possessions with 3 and outs.
Yep. And that's why this is a great game for Texas to kind of figure out what that identity is, because Mississippi State 98th in rush defense, about 90th if you look at yards per rush allowed. And the games that I went and looked at, the A&M game, the Florida game, Tennessee game, they were able to get big chunk yards at times, and they were able to pound the rock on the inside, the interior run game. Florida had averaged over 6 yards per rush running through the A and the B gaps versus Mississippi State. A&M, Ruben Owens had a field day. He was over 8 yards per rush in the A and the B gaps running the football for A&M. They averaged over 7 yards per rush on inside powers, mostly duo. If you look at the counter, they averaged almost 6 yards per rush on counter. Talking about the Aggies here. The outside power, they killed them on too. Texas version of that at times is kind of their pin and pull stuff that they do, or the outside power. But my point is, you can run inside on Mississippi State. You're getting CJ Baxter back, who is kind of your best, he is your best downhill runner for those gap and power schemes. This in Texas likes to run counter outside of outside zone, which, by the way, they still need to be able to run outside zone. The problem is, like you brought up in the Kentucky game, the Florida game, when a team's able to stop your outside zone, they don't have anything to pivot to in the run game. That's their problem. And that's what they could find in this game. Is it going to be duo like it used to be back in the day for them? Is it going to be the inside zone read? Is it going to be counter that they can depend on? They got to find whatever that pivot is in this matchup versus Mississippi State. That's the concern for them going deeper into SEC play, because my guess is that most of the teams they play will be able to at least neutralize the outside zone if that's all they're going to bring to the table. Yeah. And Oklahoma couldn't do it, but I think other teams may be able to do it. You got to have something to pivot to in the running game. I think you can do it because other teams have been able to run inside bully ball gap power schemes against Mississippi State downhill. Texas can run counter. Texas can run duo. At least they used to be able to when they had Jay Witt and Bijan and Rojo back in the day. But I think with Cedric Baxter, they'll be able to get back to some of that too. In this game.
And I think, too, having Connor Robertson and Nick Brooks getting a full week to work together with your center and left guard, I think that'll help a little bit. It won't be as foreign to both those guys coming out on Saturday. But, we'll get into the Mississippi State offense here in a minute, Rob. But I think it boils down to which one of these play callers can be patient. I think patience of Sark's patience and Jeff Lebby's patience, I think, are both going to be tested in this game. And we talked about Sark's already. It's like, look, can you just – resist the urge to hunt the shot plays? And that's, even going back to early in his tenure, that's something he gradually got away from, Rod, because they were able to hit the shot play more often than not the last couple of years. But you go back to especially like 2022, we would sit here and talk about, man, they spend way too much time hunting shot plays. And at that point, you had Bijan and Rojo, and you could just hand them the football, and that was kind of your break glass in case of emergency. Just hand them the football and get out of a game if the shot play wasn't working. You don't have that fallback plan now. So really, I think for Sark, it's patience in terms of resisting the urge to utilize the shot play and try to stay on schedule. And I think for Jeff Lebby, this should be the goal for Texas, Rod. And I think this will test Jeff Lebby's patience. If Texas can get a lead in the first half of this game, 7-0, 10-0, 13-3, whatever it is, the earlier in the game, you can allow your pass rush to be a factor the greater your chances are going to be to win. Because if Mississippi State gets behind the 8 ball and then they feel like, okay, now we got to throw the ball, because one thing about Jeff Lebby and Kendall Browse does, all the guys that run the veer and shoot do this. At some point, they all get impatient. Like if the shot play is not working, or you're going 3 and out because you do go really fast, and all of a sudden you realize you're in a low possession game, they can get really impatient real quick. If Jeff Lebby gets impatient and starts to turn into a throw game, that's advantage Texas all day, every day. It's hard as it is when you're not facing an elite pass rush and you've got to throw the football to try to succeed that way. Now add on the fact that with Texas, you've got some of the best pass rushers in the country. The earlier you can make your pass rush an impact on a game, the better off you're going to chance your hands to.
Totally agree. I usually would say, yes, of course, advantage Texas if it becomes a throw game. But with your offensive line right now, one of the worst pass protection units in the country, I'm not sure that's the case. Because you are just as vulnerable as the opponent is, considering you got a dominant defensive pass rush, but your offensive pass protection is one of the worst in the country, if not the worst.
Yeah.
Against powerful opponents, you're allowing a 49% pressure rate. That is the worst among our Power 4 teams, according to PFF. So you got to avoid the throw game. Like you said, you got to avoid it. You got to avoid it because you can't afford to expose your quarterback like that. And your offensive line just has not proven that they are trustworthy enough for you to get into a throw game like that. That's why you got to avoid the predictable passing situations, to your point. So I usually would agree, but this offensive line they've changed my tune a little bit because they've been that bad. To your point about Sark curtailing the deep shots, before we start flipping the script here to the other side of the ball, I think he has modified the offense a little bit. I mean, they've only got 4 passes of 20-plus yards the last 2 games. 15 drop back screens, 15 drop backs where they intended to throw a screen pass. That's very different for Sark. Usually Sark, he's throwing about 4 or 5 screens a game. Now he's close to throwing like 8 screens a game, and he's not throwing a deep play. He's averaging 2 deep balls a game. Early in the season, I think they were averaging like 6 deep balls a game in the first 5 games. So I think he understands the limitations now. I think now you get even more drastic measures, to your point. I think he's got to drop all the 5-man protection passes, whatever those are, drop them. You can only do 6-7, like the young kids say, 6 and 7-man protections. That's it. You got to go max pro. If you want to go downtown, you got to go max pro, period. That's where you are as an offense now. I know that makes you a little bit predictable, but otherwise you're going to get your quarterback killed and ultimately potentially something even worse happening.
Yeah, the saving grace for Texas, and you may look at it and say, okay, where does the Texas offensive line has to be one of the worst in the country in allowing sacks? Well, I mean, it's not great, but I mean, they're 55th in the country allowing 1.67 per game. But when you think about how much pressure Arch has been, if it wasn't for Arch's legs, you probably would be close to the bottom or at the bottom in terms of sacks allowed. Now, on the flip side, where you got a guy like Blake Shapen, who I'm not going to say Blake Shapen's not athletic, but he's not, because of his body's taken so much punishment over the years. He's not quite what he was earlier in his career at Baylor. You look at that Mississippi State offensive line, Rod, they're 113th in the country, 14th in the SEC in sacks per game allowed at 2.67. So to your point, neither of these teams avoid a game where all of a sudden you are forced to throw the football, because that's not a game either one of these teams is going to win. So I think from an outside perspective, it's hard to recalibrate, because you think, okay, Sark against Jeff Lebby, like you think about that Texas OU game back in 2023, you think, man, it's going to be a lot of points and a lot of yards and explosive plays. No. This game could be over in like an hour and a half, because I think both of these coaches want to run the football, shorten the game, make it a low possession game, and try to see if you can flip something on defense and special teams. So it's really weird how you have to think of it, but I think right now that's just how both these coaches have to play it.
It's a great point too, and both their defenses are really good taking the football away. They're both top 10 in takeaways. They got 10 interceptions on the season. All right, let's jump to the other side of the ball for Mississippi State. That offense going up against the Texas defense, and you talked about it, Jeff. The veer and shoot presents its own unique problems and issues for a defense.
Well, it's been tweaked over the years, right? It's not the one that Art Browse was running at Baylor, back in 2011, 2012. It's not exactly the same one. And there aren't that many guys running it anymore. I mean, if you want to run that offense, you got to get, Kendall Browse or Jeff Lebby, somebody that really knows it. But, you look at where that offense is right now at its core. it's still the same thing. You want to be able to stress the defense horizontally with your splits. You want to be able to stress them vertically with the vertical passing game. You want to be able to stress them with tempo. And when you start to adjust to defending them on the perimeter, now all of a sudden the middle of the field opens up, and that's when you can run the football. I think people forget, D'Onta Foreman had a 2,000-yard season when Texas ran the veer and shoot that one season in 2016 with Sterling Gilbert. So the veer and shoot, it wants to make situations favorable to where you can run the ball. And, Fluff Bothwell, we'll see if he plays in this game. I know he's on the injury report. We'll see if he plays and how effective he is. But, Rod, you start looking at Mississippi State, the one thing that really stood out to me when looking at their numbers, according to Pro Football Focus, their A-gap runs. To the left of the center in the A-gap, 40 carries for $180. That's 4.5 per carry. To the right of the center, that right A-gap, 40 carries for $195. That's almost 5 yards a carry. But, you look between the tackles, 3.3, 3.3, 2.63, 2.35, 2.25. That's yards after contact per attempt. So, again, they are kind of traditional veer and shoot, whereas they do want to, between the tackles, make it favorable to try to run the football and create one-on-one situations. It's not that Mississippi State has just all-world running backs. I'm not saying their running backs are bad, but you create more one-on-one situations, obviously, when this veer and shoot, it lends itself to that. And you still want to throw it vertically because take a look at Brennan Thompson. Go look at his numbers. He's got 4 touchdowns this year. All of them are on passes 20 yards or more down the field. So you start breaking down, like we got like Brennan Thompson, there's not a whole lot of diversity in that route tree. It's either a screen or he's trying to get behind you. So the veer and shoot has changed, Rod, but at its core, it still wants to stress you horizontally, vertically, get after you with tempo, and try to run the football.
I want to say that dude is averaging if you look at his A-dot, his average depth of target, he's over 18 yards is his average depth of target.
And that's when you include the screen passes.
That's absurd. That's definitely a top 10 number in the country. That is absurd, man. But to your point, one of the things in terms of stressors, another stressor, they just kind of, like to combine all these stress factors on a defense is the tempo. Now, one thing that we haven't talked a lot about, Michael Taft is going to be out for a couple of weeks. He's got the thumb injury, and he's your master communicator on the back end, right? He's the guy that makes all the checks, audibles. He's been doing it forever in that secondary. And he's usually the guy making sure everybody's lined up in the right place, kind of an eraser. If you look at mistakes that could be made back there, busted coverages, he's your eraser back there. You're not going to have him against a tempo-oriented team, which, in my opinion, is going to affect communication because you got to communicate either really quickly and make your adjustments really quickly on the fly, looking at the formation, looking at the motion, or you got to be so hive-minded. You've played together so long, which is not the case for these guys because they'll be playing. Derek Williams will be playing there, Xavier Filsaime, that everybody's on the same page. Everybody's always looking and thinking the same thing. Or big wristband game. Make sure everybody's on the same page. We automatically know. But I will say that it does lend itself to busted coverages, defending these types of offenses. And just a simple thing, just something very simple. You're like, oh, how'd that guy end up? Like, oh, I thought we were checking the cloud coverage when we were going against trips. It's like, nah, man, we're checking the cover 4. You're just on the back end. That means you're in man cover solo. Like, it's just that simple things. And I think that's what Texas needs to be aware of in this game because I know Jeff Lebby knows it. He knows Taft is out. And I bet he's thinking funky formations, funky shifts, and funky motions to see how they adjust and try to encourage a coverage bust on the back end. So they need to be buttoned up.
Yeah. That's part of it, Rod. I think the other part too is if you're Texas, defending the tempo and defending the tempo from a standpoint of when you have the opportunity to get off the field on third down. I know, it's coach be like, oh yeah, you got to get the field on third down. Like, no, when you face a veer and shoot team, because you talk to those guys that were on that Baylor staff back in the day. And even Art Browse has talked about it. Kendall Browse has talked about it. The main thing they want to do, get that first down. Because when you get that first down, now, boom, now you're in tempo. Now you control the pace of the game. Now you're off and running. So when you can't have what happened against Kentucky, Rod, where you've got 3rd and 7s and 3rd and 8s and 3rd and 9s, and you're allowing the opponent to convert because now you're really up against it. So when you have the opportunity to get them off the field on third down, you got to handle business in this game. Otherwise, now you may be caught in a personnel package because if they get that first down, they're not subbing. They're just going. Now you may be caught in, NASCAR personnel, and now they want to run it between the tackles. So you're going to be really up against it if you don't get off the field on time. Yep,
totally agree. And I think for Texas, they can get to the passer because Blake Shapen, I believe he's been sacked. Maybe they've allowed 20 sacks, I think, something like that on the season. And I think Texas, if they can get him in a predictable pass situation, this offensive line is a little bit leaky in pass protection. So I think in Texas is on a hot streak, maybe one of the hottest streaks in the country. If you look at the last 2 weeks, they've had 10 sacks total. So that's something to watch there as well. But I'm with you, though, Jeff. You're right about that. Get off the field. They didn't do that really well last week. A lot of it was Cutter Boley scrambling. I talk about the scramble drill all the time. He was great. I think he had like 60 yards scrambling against that. The touchdown came on the scramble. Blake Shapen I don't think he's as gifted of a scrambler as Cutter Boley. Seemed like, I know he can scramble, but I don't think he's as good. Cutter Boley actually was pretty damn good at it.
It seems like at this point in his career, again, seems like he spent more time in the medical tent than he has on the field at times. As much punishment as he's put his body through, it does seem like he's being more, I guess, liberal, for lack of a better term, in terms of when he decides to take off and run. He really calculated on when he wants to pull that ball down and run. And to your point, Rob, Mississippi State's allowed 16 sacks. Only 2 offenses in the SEC have allowed more. South Carolina, who may have the worst offensive line in the SEC, and then Auburn's allowed 22 sacks. You got to remember, 10 of them came in that one road game against Oklahoma. So this Mississippi State offensive line, they will give up some sacks.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff there, Jeff. As always, I think our final sponsor of the evening, our friends over at Advanced Pain Care, and we do have a message from 2 legendary lifetime Longhorns from our friends at Advanced Pain Care.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. And Advanced Pain Care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and Advanced Pain Care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced Pain Care. The pain stops here.
All right. Thank you to our friends at Advanced Pain Care. Thank you to our friends at Duck Camp as well, duckcamp.com. And thank you, Jeff. We appreciate all the expertise and the knowledge. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes, twisting and tweaking the dials. We appreciate all of his hard work. And thanks to each and every one of you for watching and for listening. And for Jeff and for Matthew, I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Until next time, hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em.